Good morning. Our reading today comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, verses 38 through 44. Hear the story of Jesus hanging out with his disciples around the treasury, and how it is not the rich and their opulence that seizes his heart and imagination, but rather the act of a poor widow and her simple yet profound gift. As he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on."
Thanks, Amy. So it was early 1900s in Dayton, Ohio, in a little makeshift bicycle shop owned by a couple brothers, maybe you've heard of them, named Orville and Wilbur Wright, who had a passion to do something that the world to this point had never seen. They wanted to fly. These 2 brothers were not engineers. They were not pilots. They were not trained in mathematics, physics, or had any scientific background whatsoever, and they had no money. They had very little money to pursue their endeavor except that which they made from running their small bicycle shop. The only things they were armed with was a dream, a whole lot of passion, and a lot of belief that they could do the seemingly impossible, take to the sky like birds. Now, across the nation at the Smithsonian Institution, a well-funded senior officer and mathematics professor, mind you, named Samuel Pierpont Langley, well, he also had the same dream. He wanted to fly. Except for him, money and resources were no object, because you know who his friends were? Andrew Carnegie, Alexander Graham Bell, as well as the War Department of the United States that was giving him huge money to help him pursue his dream to take to the skies, take to the friendly skies. I think that's a thing. He assembled a team of the best scientific minds, all the best scientific minds, and he used his formidable funding to accomplish his goal. But here's the thing. On December 17th, 1903, despite having none of that funding and no research team of the best minds, these 2 humble Wright brothers with no college education became the first people to ever take to the skies and fly. And in doing so, they changed history forever. And they did so because of one word: their why. It was the year 1976, and a couple buddies, both named Steve, he started dreaming and tinkering with electronics in one of their parents' garages in Northern California. Now, there were already big, massive companies such as Hewlett-Packard and IBM and others that were far, far ahead of them in the computer-making game. And they had companies full of engineers and software developers and marketers and the whole works. But these 2 Steves, you know them, Steve Wozniak, and what was the other guy's name? Oh, Steve Jobs. Well, they were Wozniak. Well, Wozniak, whatever.
I think you would know that.
They were. I'm an Apple guy. You would think I'm right, Casey. They were not going to be intimidated by these giants, and they believed they could do something different. They worked around the clock in that dimly lit garage to build a new kind of computer that others weren't making, that would allow ordinary people like us, to enjoy them rather than just big, giant corporations that were producing these super expensive computers. And they dug in and they dug deep within themselves. And they created what was called Apple I, the first of its kind computer for the ordinary person to be able to use. Now, the first year, get this, with just this one computer to offer in their first year, they made $1 million. Their second year, they made $10 million. In their fourth year, this small company run by these two Steves with a dream sold more than $100 million worth of computers. And by their sixth year, they were $1 billion company with 3,000 employees. They shifted the global paradigm. And they changed the world to this very day, armed with a dream, their drive, and their why. And in the 1960s, a prophet rose up in this nation to challenge racism and segregation, armed with dreams of equality and respect and love. And he made eloquent speeches and he spoke powerful words, as did many others before him. But he was different. He was different. His commitment was different. His drive was different. And on August 28th, 1963, 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. to hear him speak about his dream for this nation and for this world. And keep in mind, this is 1963, right? There's no websites to advertise this. There's no to get the date and the time. Who dared to dream, who wanted to tell the world about that dream. So armed with his dream, with his conviction and passion, and his why, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did indeed change the world to this very day. And it all started with his why. Three great stories that come from a wonderful book written by a guy named Simon Sinek called Start with Why. He's a leadership coach of sorts who challenges readers and organizations and companies to think a little deeper about the whys in our lives. Why do we do what we do? He writes, quote, "Any person or organization can explain what they do. Some can explain how they are different or better, but very few can clearly articulate why. Why is not about money or profits. Those are the results. Why is the thing that inspires us and those around us," end quote. Or to put it a little more succinctly, he writes, "What is your purpose, cause, or belief? Why does your organization, I'll say church, why does your church exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care?" End quote. So in using the Wright brothers, the two Steves, and Dr. King, he illustrates three examples of people that were driven with such clarity and purpose of vision that there was nothing in the world that was going to stop them. And though they were up against seemingly insurmountable odds, they never stopped dreaming and they never stopped striving until they literally altered the trajectory of the world with their dreams, with their commitment, and their focus on why exactly they were doing what they were doing. So with today's strategic planning session that we'll be engaging in just a bit, that is a question I want us, collectively and individually, to grapple with. What is our why as a spiritual community? And what is your why as a part of this spiritual community? Or Simon might put it, why do you get out of bed on a Sunday morning and come here? What feeds you and inspires you to want to be a part of this spiritual movement? And when you tell others about this place, why should anyone care? I know someone else who had his why. And it's the one we follow, the one we literally get out of bed to come and tell his story and seek inspiration from him still today and to immerse ourselves in his story. That man's name is Jesus, the man that operated obviously out of the center of his why. The what and the hows of his vision were important. Those are the stories that he told, the crowds he gathered, the words he spoke, the things that he did. Those are his, as Simon Sinek would call them, his whats and his hows. But his why was his center and his driving force, that the world he saw around him was not the way things were supposed to be. He believed deep in his core that there was an alternative vision of the world where fairness, oh my God, things like fairness and equality and justice and love and inclusion were the hallmarks of how we live together and how God was calling us to live. And he gave his whole life towards that why. Not for money. He didn't do it for power. He didn't do it for fame, but because that vision was deep in his bones. And he could do nothing other than to work to make it a reality and shift the paradigm of the times toward his vision and his dream. I think that's what we have in the story today that Amy read of the widow, who, even though she didn't have to give a penny to the temple treasury, the widows were exempt from any kind of temple tax, didn't matter. She still gave everything as Jesus watched her. I think that's why Jesus related to her and said what he did about her. He recognized someone else that had her why. She knew exactly why she was giving all that she had to the treasury, and not a dang thing was going to stop her. It gave her life, and she couldn't imagine her life without that, to the point where she gave her whole being. It was not guilt or obligation. Again, the poor did not have to give to the treasury. They were exempt, especially widows. But she believed so strongly in something that even giving all she had was worth it. Much like Jesus would do with his very own life as he lived his why and telling people about the kingdom of God, inclusion, again, equity, fulfillment, and justice for all people. He recognized a kindred soul in this widow, someone living out their why just like he did. Sinek said in his book that those who have their why, I'll say like the widow, this is my words, like the widow, like Jesus, they have one thing in common. One thing in common. That's a vision of the world that does not yet exist and the ability to communicate it. A vision of the world that does not yet exist and the ability to communicate it. Well, she communicated her vision pretty powerfully, I'd say, with her 2 clinks of the coins in the coffer. And in the end, she caught the attention of the greatest visionary that the world has ever known, Jesus. Sorry, Steve Jobs. Jesus got you beat. Start with why. Start with why. So my question to you and to myself, I've been asking this all week, as we contemplate our future through this strategic planning process, is what is your why in relation, again, to this spiritual community, Faith UCC? What is your why? Specifically, why do you come here? Think about that. Why do you get out of bed in the morning and come to this place right now? Why do you give up doing so many other things on an obviously beautiful Sunday morning or all sorts of other times in the week to come here, either in person or even online, to spend an hour or two? Why? Why do you tell people you meet about this place during the course of your week and try to get them to come here to experience what you experience? Why? Why do you give your hard-earned money? You could spend it on anything else you ever wanted. Why do you give your hard-earned money to support the work of this church, Faith UCC? Why? Why are you here? I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, what the heck are you doing here? I mean, really, dig deep in yourself. Like, why? Think about that. Why are you here? And don't say, because of the music, or the worship, or the great preaching, or the handsome pastor, or Casey, or the hospitality. Those are the whats.
Well, the people online are here because of it.
That's true. Good point, Casey. those are the whats, and those are the hows. But what is the why? Focus on your why. For in that question, literally, as Neil will tell you, lies our future. Back to Sinek's book again for a moment. Speaking about Apple, I was struck by how he compared this young garage-born company vision to how so many other businesses operated, many that failed. He writes that this would be their message if they were companies, just a normal, bland Hewlett-Packard, although they were pretty successful. Other companies that failed, that didn't know their why. He writes this. This could be their tagline. Oh, we make great computers. They are beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? It's not very inspiring, is it? It could be any company. It could be anyone. No way, you're not going to buy into that. That's what everybody says. But he tells us that's not how they operate, because they got their why. Here's their actual message. In everything we do, we believe in changing the status quo. Whew, I'm already in. We believe in thinking differently. I'm definitely in. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Oh, and we happen to make great computers. You want to buy one? I'm in. Very different. I'm hooked. He sums this all up with one great line. I know this is a product, but we're a different kind of entity, but the line applies. People don't buy what you do. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. I think that's a great way for us to approach our future as well, especially through this process. Not by focusing on all those what we do. When we do great things here, we really do. But the why that drives us to do what we do. That's what we want to identify. So our tagline could be this. We're a progressive church. Where all are welcome. We have lively worship and a choir and have all sorts of justice, mission, and education opportunities happening all week long. Come and worship with us on a Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. Is that inspiring? No, that could be the tagline of any mainline church, right? It really could. Even churches that aren't progressive are saying things like that. All are welcome. Right. Right. But if we are truly speaking from our why, deep within ourselves, our why, well, then our message could sound a little different. How about something like this? That's a why. That's a why. How about something like, in everything we do, we believe in challenging the traditional religious status quo. The way we challenge the status quo is by seeking the experience of God over the belief in God and journeying together on a path paved with love, inclusion, equity, and mindfulness. We also happen to be a church. Want to join us? Yeah, I like that. That has me excited, right? Because it all begins and ends with our why. That says our why. Not our what, not our how, our why. Speaking of Apple, I want to close with the words of one of the Steves that lived out his why in his parents' garage as he built a multi-billion-dollar company. It's a quote of his I've always been really fond of by Steve Jobs, because I see us in it as well. I see us as people crazy enough to believe that we can shift the paradigm like our other visionaries did that we talked about. So today this quote is for you, us, Faith UCC. It's from Steve Jobs. Here's to the crazy ones. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes, ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the one thing you can't do is ignore them because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the ones that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. Whew! End quote. And it all begins and ends and begins again and again with our why. I can't wait to hear your why, Faith UCC, as this process unfolds and we dream a new future together in just a bit. It all starts with why. What is your why? What is your why? Amen.